Welcome to the Climbing the Charts podcast. I'm Angie Lawless, and I'm here with my co-host, Brandon Miller.
Today, we are honored and very excited to welcome Bob Mendes as our guest on Climbing the Charts. Bob is the Chief Development Officer for the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County. Prior to this role, which began in October of last year, October 23, Bob practiced law for about 32 years, most recently as a partner member at Sherrard & Rowe, where he focused mostly on commercial and bankruptcy matters. Bob's also no stranger to public service, however, as he served the city as a council member at large from 2015 to 2023. In addition to this extensive and impressive resume, Bob, who's also a graduate of the University of Chicago Law School, also led the Metro Council Special Committee on the East Bank in 2022 and 2023. His distinguished service on that committee was, of course, a big part of why Mayor O'Connell tapped him for this new role. And now that is his boss. Okay, so because this is Music City, we like to start out asking our guests about their musical interests. What are you listening to these days?
You know, I guess the women of country are on my playlist a lot.
Yeah. Are you a Radiohead?
Yeah. You got the era.
They tend to correlate with REM.
Yeah. You're really tuning in with Brandon here.
Did you see U2 at the Sphere?
I have not, no. Assembly Hall on the campus of University of Illinois, circa 87, 88. Saw them there.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Okay, so you were practicing law at Sherrard & Rowe while you were doing 8 years on Metro Council, but you just finished that up. So when Mayor O'Connell asked you to step into the administration as the Chief Development Officer, was that a difficult decision?
Yeah, I think we lost count of how many times he asked me. It was around, 10, 12. A year ago today, I thought I was going to get out of the council being term limited and go back to full-time practice of law. I was trying to help him win the mayoral election because I believed in him, continue to believe in him. And I was getting involved in a bunch of council races that I thought mattered. But I thought I'd hit October and be back full-time practicing law. So the first couple times he asked me, I was like, no, man, I got I got stuff going on. The more we talked about it and the deeper we got in the campaign, we realized that the relationship that we had in the council for 8 years, where we were really closely aligned on a lot of core issues. We didn't always vote alike, but we when we didn't, we understood what the differences were. Wow. It's an easy fit. I don't know how many hundreds of hours we spent talking and working on stuff together over the 8 years. And it does feel like a continuation of that. And the reality is, I think neither one of us would ever trade in our time in the council. There is a difference in the executive branch. There's more executing. We can get more done in a week in the executive branch than you might be able to get done in 6 months or a year. That doesn't make the council inefficient. That's the job and the checks and balances. The job of the executive branch is to do stuff, get stuff done. And the legislative branch is about policy and guidance and setting the boundaries and the ground rules. And it's a different gig, and it is fun. I think it's the right word, to be able to be in the executive side and move things forward and try to build the city around, we think, the shared vision that people have.
Yeah. When you were in Metro Council, what's an accomplishment or two that stands out to you that you're really proud of?
There's really two categories. There's the stuff that made the papers, and then there's the little stuff that never makes the papers.
Yeah.
The big stuff, like I think I led the way on reform of tax increment financing. We today have traffic stops that are about a couple percent of what they were when I first took office. I was the lead sponsor of legislation to have the police department do reporting on traffic stops, which helped change the policy. I feel like the work against the football stadium financing, while we lost that battle, had a big impact on the election last year. So that's a big deal. And some of the smaller stuff is, I ran into somebody last week that I hadn't seen for a while. A young woman in town, I think she's in her 30s. She introduced herself and she told me how much it had meant to her personally that I had been loud and upfront about speaking out against the state's anti-LGBT laws. Mm-hmm. And just like this person crying in front of me, like that's a moment that like that means, as much as or more than anything of the stuff that actually makes the papers.
Two different people in separate conversations last night. We had an event and we brought up that we were, talking with you today, and they said, he really cares about people. And I know that that's like, it's not like, maybe it shouldn't be that much of a compliment, but I think sometimes when you're in government, you kind of get labeled as not caring or missing it in some way. But it was like,
or a technocrat.
Yeah. But the earnestness of both of these people to say, this guy, he really cares, and he's more than kind of like just what you see. Like there's a lot of heart there. So
we're going to start talking about the East Bank. Kind of just explain to our listeners, what the East Bank is, and I think most people in Nashville are aware that there's a lot of things happening on the East Bank. We've got Titan Stadium. There's headlines about Oracle. I think a lot of people don't know how big it is, how these things relate to each other. So just kind of give our listeners a little bit of an overview of, what does it mean to you when you hear the term, East Bank redevelopment?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think a lot of people, even folks really close to government, have a hard time picturing the size and scope and scale of the project. And so I like to use a couple comparisons. So the East Bank technically is everything between the interstate and the river. It's 550 acres. Usually people are either going by at 50 miles an hour or really slowly at 2 miles an hour, but not really stopping there. And there are 0 permanent residents in the 550 acres. And this is an area that's it's relatively narrow, but the length of it is, if you started at Bridgestone Arena and walked to the Parthenon in Centennial Park, that's roughly the length from the scrap yard at one end up to Oracle at the far north end, where Oracle will be up at the far north end. And when you think about, if you actually did the walk starting at Bridgestone, you'd be downtown. I'm crossing into Midtown, the heart of Midtown. I'm almost to Vanderbilt. I'm at Vanderbilt. Right. Here's the park. There's a palpable difference in the neighborhoods there.
Right.
And what we're trying to have in the long run is a series of neighborhoods that will run along the river with the sort of distance that I'm describing. And so that's the biggest version of it. The next step down version is
all very sort of like urban feel, though.
Yes, right. And anybody who's you go to Chicago or New York and you get on the train, and like you'll see that you're passing more people and residents in a couple blocks than even we have through half of Midtown, just from the density. And the East Bank is an opportunity. The planning document that we have, Imagine East Bank, calls for a dense, urban, mixed use, mixed income, multimodal transit area that's basically, for people old enough to remember SimCity, we're playing SimCity for real. We are building a dense urban environment. And then,
when we were talking to Michael Briggs earlier in the week, he was geeking out about SimCity.
Micro machines
before SimCity.
Precursor to SimCity.
Wow. All right.
So, talk to him about that.
That's a bridge too far for me.
Sorry, Michael.
And then Metro owns 130 of those 550 acres, and basically everything from the Korean Veterans Bridge to James Robertson Parkway, from the interstate to the river, Metro owns that. And for scale, again, the entirety of the gulch is 60 acres. So the Metro owned land on the East Bank is 2 gulches.
So the East Bank Authority that was just established by the state, you were involved in that pretty heavily, I'm assuming. Yeah. And so the idea, as I understand it, is that we'll be able to carry on through administrations sort of a a plan. Can you sort of summarize that authority for listeners?
We hope to have one day an East Bank Development Authority. Think like Sports Authority or Airport Authority or Convention Center Authority. And in order to have it come into existence, we needed to get a law passed by the state, which we did in the end of April. And then the Metro Council would need to pass the exact same thing. And we'll introduce that for first reading, I think, on June 18th. Okay. And then if the council passes the same thing the state passes, then the authority will come into existence and will appoint board members, and the mayor will appoint a first executive director. And then we would likely have an intergovernmental agreement between Metro and the new authority to move certain rights and obligations to the Development Authority. This is the same thing we did when the Music City Center was built, and when we started building professional sports stadiums, we got the Sports Authority, and back in the 70s with the Airport Authority. And the thinking is generally there's several advantages. When we blew through 5 mayors in 8.5 years or whatever the statistic is, for all those authorities, they had stability in leadership and reported to their board. So with the most important assets that we have as a city, we're insulating that a little bit from political ups and downs. And then there's specialization. The Airport Authority, I personally wouldn't want the mayors and council we've had, including myself, over the last 40 years to have been running an international airport. We're able to hire professional leadership for these various authorities to make the asset be all that it can be. And that's really what we're looking for with the East Bank Development Authority.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Because how long, if things went, and we know that they don't, but this is a very long project to complete. I know that we're in the IDA right now, but that we're just starting to contemplate, which is what, 30?
Explain what the IDA is, because a lot of people are not going to know what IDA means.
Sure. And so I'll get to the IDA in a second, but from a time scale, again, if the Gulch is 60 acres, construction started around 2000, 2001, there are still cranes there, and that's 60 acres a quarter century later. And similarly, even Metro's 30 acres that we've just started with the IDA, the initial development area, it's going to take a minute to turn into reality. The old Lifeway campus, Nashville Yards, is 20 acres. They're closing in on 10 years of construction there. Cranes are still up.
Right.
And so that gives some sense of the scale.
So we could be looking at 10 to 20 years at least just to do the IDA, the 30 acres, and then from there.
Yeah. And so I mentioned Metro's got 130 acres on the East Bank. 20 of it is tied up with the new football stadium. We just did this initial development area agreement for 30 more acres with a company from Boston, the Fallon Company, where they're going to develop it for us. That leaves Metro 80 acres left, and a big chunk of that's got the current football stadium on it. And over a decade or more, as the current stadium goes away and we turn to the next 80 acres, Metro will be able to get those developed to the final state. But for the full 130 acres, I'd be happy if it was mostly underway a quarter century from now. Again, like the Gulch. When you factor in, a little bit down the road, you get Oracle supposedly is going to build a multi-billion-dollar campus, and the old truck stop is 18 acres. That's right across James Robertson Parkway.
Oh yeah, right.
The old TA truck stop. Their public statements are that they plan $2.4 billion worth of development there. So we've got at least 4 multi-billion-dollar projects in close proximity, and a TPAC on the side that doesn't quite qualify as multi-billion.
Yeah,
but very expensive.
And TPAC is in the IDA.
Yes.
Right.
Right. And so for the rest of the initial development area with Fallon, we have a complex 99-year deal approved by the council. It was like 450 pages worth of legal stuff. And with TPAC, what we got approved a couple months ago was a non-binding memorandum of understanding that was only like 5 or 6 pages. We're in the midst of negotiating now what the full deal is with TPAC, and we expect to bring that to the council hopefully by the end of the summer. But they would be, assuming we reach the finish line on that, they'll be part of the...
That was like a $60-ish million, is that right, scale for TPAC? I think that's what I read.
600, you're off of zero.
Whoa.
Cool.
Yeah, they intend to get $500 million worth of funding from the state.
They've got 250.
So far, they've got 250, and they intend to get another 250.
Oh, wow.
And the money from the states coming at a 5-to-1 match. Like for every dollar they raise, they get 5 from the state. So they need to raise $100 million to capture
the full.
Their hopeful $500 million from the state.
Yeah, I thought that they had I was at a TPAC event the other day, and they said, I know you wanted me to show you the design, but come talk to me with your donation and I'll show you, and we'll talk about it. I don't know if they said they would show you. So I thought that was pretty clever.
Okay. So I think as many of our listeners know, you led a committee to study the new Titan Stadium proposal and ultimately came down against it, a position that candidate Freddie O'Connell also came to embrace. And I think as you made reference to earlier, was a top issue, I think, in the mayor's race because it was a position that was not shared by very many of the candidates. I think Gingrich and Freddie were the only two who kind of took that position. So tell us, why did you reach that conclusion and what should we understand about it? I know too, it's a little complicated because it did pass. And so now you're in the mayor's job and your job as well is to make that as successful as it can be. Yeah,
let's start there. So we are, continuity and reliability of government's a big deal. We want agreements that we reach to be honored by future mayors. And so Mayor Cooper and the last council duly passed the deal, and we're honoring it in every imaginable way and not seeking to retrade it at all.
Well, and that sort of happened at Geodis. I mean, that was a big headline.
It was retraded a little bit after the 2019 election. The new mayor did dig into that and change some terms. And Mayor O'Connell feels really strongly that we honor the deal, and I'm good with that. It's we do want the things we come up with and get approved by the council to be honored. We want the business community to have the reliability that Metro's word is worth it.
Mm-hmm. And we want outsiders to trust us.
It's important that the city honor its obligations. So we're honoring that in every way, shape, or form. The objection that I had was around the financing of the stadium deal, where combined the city and state government paying 2/3 of the construction cost, which is out of line with most recent stadium deals. And it came to a total of $1.26 billion between state and local. And that is way, way more than the next highest ever in America. The highest, other than that, I think was $850 for a football stadium in Buffalo between the city and state.
We're paying 50% more.
So we crushed the previous record. Like we're number one on that. And we didn't feel that it was appropriate to have 2/3 of the deal, $1.26 billion of government money in it. And there's real world impact. The 2018 transit referendum relied in part on a 1% piece of hotel-motel tax. It didn't pass, so that's been sitting out there. That 1% is now dedicated to building a new football stadium. So when Mayor O'Connell puts together the current transit referendum,
he doesn't have that money.
It doesn't have hotel-motel tax. It's sales.
That tool's already been used in the tool.
Whereas he might not would have had to put it in the sales tax.
There could have been a different balance at least. Yeah. And, I got ridiculed soundly by the folks in favor of the football stadium about quoting economists. But this is like actually a chapter in economics books. Like money is finite, and we had a certain sliver of tax money, 1% of hotel motel. You could spend it on A, transit or B, football stadium, we collectively made a choice to put it on in football rather than transit or anything else. And so it was the parameters of the financing deal that we didn't care for. But this city's been trying for 30 years to have development around a football stadium, and up till now it hasn't worked. And we are intent on honoring the Imagine East Bank plan, which calls for neighborhood. Mm-hmm. We value our tourism district. We want it to stay on that side of the river. We want it to be a genuine neighborhood for Nashvillians around the football stadium.
Yeah, and I read that, I talked to Isaac Adai recently, and I also was reading something that said that of the first two buildings, that one of them is 300 residential affordable units with a daycare center. And Isaac was telling me that was really something that you were pushing for, that was super important to you. Do you think that have we planned enough? Have we thought enough about affordable housing in, kind of this East Bank plan? And then also, how has it been received by the city at large with what we have designated?
Yeah. So we're proud of the affordable housing components of the deal. We think there's some aspects that are unprecedented compared to what we've done previously. Back when affordable housing as part of development really got going, it was Mayor Purcell that started that. And at the time, the first deals had an affordability period where the units had to be affordable for like 5 years, 7 years. And now we've been drifting, first 10, then 15, and we've had some pushing 2025. And for this deal, the affordability period is the full 99 years of the ground lease. So achieving 99-year affordability for the units is way unprecedented for what we've done before. And then for the raw number of units, what Fallon has promised us in these 30 acres is a minimum of 1,550 units total residential. And of that, 45% of them will be affordable. And so we think we're delivering on the goal, the objective of mixed income neighborhood. And there's a lot of good science around, mixed income neighborhoods are more successful for everybody, not just people at the lower end of the spectrum. So time will tell about whether our, efforts will work here. We can always use more affordable housing, 20,000 units more.
Right.
Part of, it's important that we do both. Like there's a raw volume number, just supply and demand. The more supply you have, you can impact price. And so there is a certain component of you guys know about deal documents, like the only thing that's incentivized in these documents, all the development milestones are around number of residential units. So we are incentivizing the heck out of them building residential units as one goal, and then separately a certain number of them need to be affordable. So we're trying to hit volume and the levels of affordability.
Well, I think it's interesting the way that you phrased it. Sounds much better than, I've heard like 700 units. And when you think about it, 700 units doesn't necessarily sound like a lot when you're looking at the deficit that we have. I mean, I don't know how we could possibly, get...
There's one study that says we need 52,000 affordable units by 2030.
Right.
But when you say it as, look, we've commanded 45% of the residential units that can be built in this area to make it work.
There's not a bigger project municipally owned going on, at least in the eastern half of the U.S. right now. There may be some former military bases out on the West Coast that are bigger, but this is the biggest municipally owned thing that's going on in America. It's interesting to talk about, but my job isn't just East Bank. My directive from the mayor is we bought a mall in Antioch. We need to redevelop that in a way that's helpful for the community. We're working on smaller projects around everywhere, trying to deliver on more than just the East Bank, because the especially the housing shortage. It's substantial policy. Initiatives need to be undertaken to cover that deficit.
So the mayor wants you to manage the largest project in the United States, plus everything else.
Well, just the real estate stuff. I mean,
I'm just kidding.
It's
that is an important point. I do think a lot of the headlines have really focused that your job is really the East Bank. I mean, I've seen it, East Bank czar, development czar.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is, it's really a much bigger, broader role. This is getting a lot of attention because it is one of the most high profile things happening in the real estate development world. ULI has ranked Nashville the kind of most interesting active city for development the last 3 years. And this is the crown jewel of that, I think.
Well, at the other end of the size spectrum, this week I've been on phone calls about 2 former school properties, one off of Brick Church Pike, north of the river, the other, the old Bellevue Library property, on College Jean Lane. And both of those have active processes underway with the community to figure out what is going to be the adaptive reuse of those properties. One for sure, we hope both of them will have housing. Mm-hmm. They'll both have other things besides housing, and we're trying to we want to be able to. We're going to get accused of over focusing on the East Bank no matter what, just because it grabs so much attention. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to make sure we do the blocking and tackling of working on projects at the other end of the size spectrum at the same time.
I like that.
So tell us a little about, I know we talked a little bit about the Fallon Company, but, kind of explain what their, kind of exact role is. You talked about this 99-year lease, and why were they ultimately selected to, I think a lot of people think of them as sort of the manager of the actual kind of boots on the ground, development that's going to be happening in the IDA.
Yeah, that's, they're our master developer, and at first blush to people who aren't involved in very large real estate projects. So 99.97% of everybody hears master developer and says, I don't know what that means. And basically, they're the ones who are going to handle building the buildings in this 30 acres. We expect a minimum of 8 to 10 buildings in the 30 acres. And then they'll own the buildings, not the land. They'll own the buildings. They'll be leasing the land from us. They'll own the buildings, and they'll be theirs to run. They'll lease them up just like any other downtown building owner would do. And then we do expect over the course of the 99 years that they'll sell the properties and some other owners will come into place. So from Metro's perspective, we've wanted to control the affordability component. We've got restrictions in the deal. If they do want to sell, first of all, we get a piece of the action. We get 1% of the gross.
And refinance, right?
Yeah, cash out refinances. We get 1% of the gross. So
you're just watching for rates to up and down. And here we go.
There's going to be some years where it's going to be some nice change for the city. And the identity of purchasing parties has to fit the characteristics that, what we've got in the deal. We've got some controls over that. Through the change to the downtown code that got before the council before the end of the summer, we're trying to control having no short-term rentals, just to keep it from being a modified hotel district.
Explain to Bob, I remember going to watch one of the planning commission meetings. I think it was last month or the month before, and you were there. And part of the presentation was the proposal to adapt the downtown code for the East Bank with form. I think the big idea is form-based codes, meaning we're not looking at this is a grocery store and this is this, but really how the buildings are going to be, sort of sized and scaled.
Right. And so we've got what's called the downtown code covers our current downtown broken into 3 sub-districts, accounting for things like the Gulch has got a different look and feel than the highest uses in the middle of downtown. And so what we're proposing is to have a 4th sub-district of the downtown code for our 30 acres and our 30 acres only on the East Bank. Anybody else who wants to develop their property, they're going to have to come talk to us. But for our 30 acres, we're seeking to have it be an extended downtown code where we very much want the look and feel to make sense. And the idea is the lowest height near the river, stepping up to a maximum of 30 to 40 stories, close to the football stadium, and then dropping down a little bit before the interstate, so we can work our way more smoothly into East Nashville.
And what is the status of that proposal?
I think it goes to the Planning Commission before the end of the month, whenever their next some meeting in June.
And the staff has recommended. I think that was the last thing that I remember was that the staff had recommended.
Well, and we're in a funny situation here, is that Metro's the landowner and we're the government. So in this situation, the Metropolitan, the taxpayers are the applicant. So we do expect it to get through the Planning Commission. I'm sure they're going to ask important questions. We think the planning staff is in tune with them enough where that'll be fine. And we'll get to the council, and the council is always entitled to kick the tires on any zoning thing in particular. And so I'm sure they'll have questions. For that truck stop property, has already been rezoned, and what we're doing with the downtown code for the East Bank matches up nicely with what's already been approved for that truck stop property. So we're hoping it goes smoothly in the council too.
Okay, so you mentioned Oracle, and Oracle purchased 60 acres. It was the largest purchase of land here. There's been a lot of speculation before, Larry Ellison came in, but that, were they going to build? What were they going to build? And now he said that this is, going to be the world headquarters. What's the significance of that to Nashville, and what involvement has the city had with Oracle in that
How
decision?
much courting did we have to do for Oracle? And then I think the number was, it was $243 million was the purchase price when they bought that 60 acres.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a lot.
Which I think was the biggest sale for a piece of land in the history of our state. So it's
So last council term, when I think it's pushing 4 years ago now, when they first were coming to town, they received incentives from both the city and the state. The city incentive is that they'll pay for a lot of infrastructure up front. They agreed to pay for $175 million worth of infrastructure up front, including a pedestrian bridge over the river into Germantown. And then they would recoup that out of getting a property tax break for approximately 20 years by basically half off property taxes for about 20 years until repaid. And that was, I think it was about 4 years ago. And, it's we're having enough conversations with them to know that they're moving forward. I think the Business Journal's reported on conversations about sewer pump stations, and there's basic infrastructure needs. It's amazing how much, like if you're going to go from zero permanent residents to a lot of high rises and residents, like there's a lot of infrastructure, and that's where the energy has been so far. On the
and you're also probably having to think about, like, in the future, trying to anticipate changing needs in the future, because you don't want to get down the road 15 years and just have
Then realize you don't have enough sewer capacity.
We're deeply, acutely aware of that. Like there's a new sewer pump station going in near the Titan Stadium between James Robertson Parkway and Woodland Street bridges near the river. And we're literally leaving room for enough pumps to double the capacity that we're putting in there because the infrastructure folks in Metro are being pretty clear-eyed about the holy heck, if this thing becomes what people say it's going to become, we need some stuff here, whether it's water, sewer, electric, Wi-Fi, like everything. There are not substantial utilities there.
I mean, Fallon's role, is that part of what they do as well, as sort of, communicate with Metro and say, like, this is our plan. We need this, and we need this, and we need this, or what sort of, I guess, interaction is there between Metro and an entity like Fallon that's kind of managing a project that's almost like terrifying just to think about how big it is?
Yeah,
at least for me,
it is. We've in our 8 months or so in office, we've tried really hard to get a good grip on what I'd call command and control of these sorts of things, because it's easy to have 30 people in Metro talking to 30 people from the Titans, talking to 30 people from the state, talking to 30 people from Fallon, and they could be deciding stuff all day long that may or may not be consistent with what the other 3,000 conversations are agreeing on. So we think for all these big projects, we think we've got a good routine where all these people have to talk to each other to iron out this stuff because it's hard. But getting some information to leadership of the respective organizations about how it's going, what's agreed on, what's open. Any given time, we've got, with each of the entities I've mentioned, we've got sort of a hit list of, I don't know the answer yet. What are we going to do? And we're doing our best to get those sequenced in a way that it doesn't bog down the pace in any of the projects. Like, as much as the mayor and I didn't love the financing of the football stadium, now that it's approved and it helps focus attention, because it's easy for me to say, hey, football stadium opens in 34 months. What are we doing about X, Y, or Z? And it focuses a lot of attention because the Titans do have, well, in combination with the Sports Authority and all our metro departments, like, we're on track to have all the utilities that they need, and they've broken ground, so they're going. And like, I think there will be a stadium opened in under 3 years from now.
Let me ask you a follow up to that. So we interviewed Mayor Cooper when he kind of was leaving office. And one of the things he said, I think one of the things he said, is to see your response to this, is that he thought it was very underappreciated what the impact of the stadium deal would be for how much metro land it did free up to develop. Is that a fair thing?
Yeah, I think it was also underappreciated how bad it'll hurt to give away 50% of the sales tax for the next 30 years for the entire area. And so if you live not East Bank, and the East Bank is generating only half the normal sales tax, you might feel like, am I subsidizing all that development there, or is it really paying for itself? Like, there's two sides to that coin.
Yeah. So yes, and also we paid for it.
Yeah, but in my law practice, I did
you used to have.
That I used to have. The part of my practice that worked with companies that were insolvent and need to be restructured. This is a company 25 years ago. I won't name the company, but they manufactured stuff, and they couldn't. They weren't making money, and they concluded they needed to manufacture more so they could sell more. And somewhere along the line, they missed that they're actually losing money on every item. So the more they manufacture, like, that was the problem. The more they manufactured, the deeper they got in the hole, because they
some
didn't
of the early electric car companies. That was basically the story. Every Chevy Volt that was sold, I think, lost like $70,000. So the more they sold, the more they lost.
Well, it's on our mind that, like, in the real world, we gave away 50% of the sales tax for all the land that Metro owns for the life of that stadium, and on top of that, we owe 2,000 parking spaces to the Titans, and we gave away all the revenue for those 2,000 parking spaces for every event in the stadium, not just football games. And so it is on our mind when it comes to building the infrastructure there. We really got to get the private partners to chip in hard on the infrastructure, because it might not be totally fair to say to the taxpayers, okay, 50% off the sales tax for decades, and you get to pay for all the infrastructure and all the parking spaces that you get no revenue from. There's like, that deal set in stone. We need to make sure the rest of it balances out to be a net win for the taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you saw some of the renderings that were released by Oracle of their cantilevered bridge design. Do you think that will get built? I think a lot of people saw that and were like, wow, this would be really cool. It'd be kind of like the iconic thing you think about Nashville from kind of the downtown view. Do you think something like that will get built?
I have no idea what it'll look like. One thing I've learned for sure over these last 8 months is do not rely on what shows up in the planning documents to reflect final reality. Like, you need to see the 100% designs before you start getting worked up about something.
So do you guys, do you sit and think about, at the end of I'm just going to say 8 years. Obviously, we're not certain, but at the end of 8 years, what do you most hope for that you've achieved in this role overall, and specifically with the East Bank?
Yeah, what does success look like?
Well, success for the mayor would be success for the city. And so this idea of it's easy to shortchange the little 3-acre thing, north of the river out in Bellevue. It's easy to shortchange that. But that's what makes people mad. When people feel like downtown's been overinvested in and the water fountains don't work in their kids' school, like even if you don't articulate it that way, on some level you're like, no, like stop doing that. And so success, he talked about during the campaign, and this is the charge going forward. Success is we got to be able to deliver projects like this, even if they're smaller in scale, all around the county. And so that's the number one thing. For the East Bank in particular, my view is all the things we're saying about the East Bank now were said in the late 90s with equal excitement, and it didn't come together. And so it's worth really, really focusing on not drinking the Kool-Aid and getting down to the blocking and tackling of getting a couple of buildings out of the ground. Like, with the Gulch, first 1 or 2 buildings, a lot of us who were here thought, well, that's kind of crazy. But by the time it was 3 or 4 or 5 buildings, like,
We start to see
All
it.
right.
damn, I think we got something there.
I think we can drive through there again.
And so a lot of our energy.
Review Loss was like the first thing in the Gulch. And then we had Roussan's opened up right next to it, which was awesome.
So a lot of our energy is like, let's get this thing started. That might be, a 4-year objective. And then, who knows, assess another 4 years if we're lucky enough to have that happen. But for now, objective, get buildings out of ground, get momentum.
And how involved is your new boss, our Mayor O'Connell, in sort of this kind of process, the development side? Is this something that he sort of delegates, or is this something that he is sort of very actively, every day kind of working on?
Well, most everybody who's known or talked to him knows that he's got sort of an unnatural ability to keep just an unworldly amount of information in his head. So I would say that he's sort of a both and on this. He's very, very, very involved in setting direction and goals. And like in the Fallon negotiation, lots and lots and lots and lots of decisions came down to him giving the guidance. Now, is he spending 25 hours a week on these things? No. Part of my job is to be able to take guidance from him and decision-making from him and execute in a way that leaves him time to run 500 square miles of a city, 700,000 people worth of stuff. Mm-hmm. So he's involved in it, and he could give just as detailed answers as I'm giving, but we try to keep him clean on time as much as we can.
Well, yeah. I mean, does he sleep?
As far as he if not, I think so. I'm
not sure when. I mean, I just don't know when he sleeps.
You get a sense of people's schedule. He doesn't quite strike me as a 6:30 a.m. guy. So I'm more of an early morning person. He tends more toward late night.
Late night.
So we each get a break from each other.
That's really nice. Okay, so we'll do a few lightning round questions here with you and then wrap it up. The name of a book that every person should read.
I was just looking at a list of my favorite books. I guess the top of my list for a long time was am I going to get it right? Beloved by Toni Morrison. I think that was very moving. And then during the summer I read trashy spy novels. With former SEAL team people shooting stuff up.
Were you a John Grisham fan?
Lawyers sort of go hot and cold on that. I was on I never really cared for his stuff.
Yeah.
But I know there's a lot of lawyers that do.
Yeah.
Were you on the do side?
I like some of his early stuff, but then I sort of kind of lost it.
Yeah, if early means like the first two.
The Firm,
Yeah,
the Pelican
like,
Brief,
right.
those were pretty good.
I was there for the first couple, and then I lost interest.
You lost
same.
interest. What is your favorite sports franchise, and why do you hate the Titans?
I got to go Chicago Cubs. I grew up a couple miles away from Wrigley Field. Both parents, families had been Cubs fans for a long time.
Who doesn't love the Cubs, really?
Yeah, I mean, they're lovable in their not winningness.
Yeah.
And then basically all the Chicago teams, except of course for the White Sox,
Yeah.
I'm good with. And then the Titans, please. My team I grew up with, the Bears, are only on TV if they're having a winning season, and they don't do that very often. And so I adopted the Titans early.
They do have a cult following here, though. I feel like there's always many bars filled with Bears fans.
Yeah, I was a season ticket owner from when they first came to town until my kids got to be grade school age, and then I wanted to do stuff with my kids rather than go to games on Sunday afternoons.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Favorite place to go for lunch or work, but in downtown area? Yeah.
Right now, I'm a fan of Joyland over on this side of the river.
Nice.
I figured out they've got a Chicago hot dog that's actually pretty good. And it's hard to beat their cheeseburger and fries, too. It's not healthy, but...
This has been a long time ago, but I was in Chicago for something, and I remember, and I was with this... you just pick up people. You're walking. I think we'd gone to a Cubs game. We just kept like accumulating people, and it's late night, and I have no idea where we were, but we were going to get some food, and it said Chicago, and this guy's like, Chicago, and like dead serious, Chicago. I was like, oh, okay. So go to Joyland. That makes sense. CMA Fest, love it and attend, love it and avoid it, or just no thanks.
Love it. Do not attend.
And avoid, yeah. Have you felt it?
For sure. Yeah. It's we obviously it's great for the city, and
great energy.
It's the core of the brand of the city, and happy to have it. However, anybody who's an office worker downtown approaches this week with a sense of dread.
Right, exactly.
Or depending on some workplaces, there's a sense of excitement about getting out early for several days.
Yeah. I was down by the river this week earlier, and they were, I guess, doing some practicing, setting up, rehearsal, no practice. It was kind of cool. Okay. Thing you'll miss least about not practicing law for now?
For the first 2-3 months, I'd get off a telephone call and try to write down time. And so it took me.
Habits die hard.
it took me a couple 2-3 months to wash that out of my system. And I got to tell you, the writing down time every day and the once a month routine invoices, I'm okay without that.
Right. It's like, even if you are an entrepreneur on some level, you step out, you start your own firm, or even if you're working in another firm, in a lot of ways you're an entrepreneur, but you still feel like you're punching a clock when you're writing that down.
Sure. Yeah. And, when I've owned my own firm for most of the time, I've been practicing in Nashville. So there's plenty of incentive, without billing time, there's no Kroger.
Right.
There's no mortgage. You kind of have to, but it does end up feeling like you're sort of chained to the billable hour.
Right. Yeah. And then who should we do this with next?
Who should we do this next with? I don't know. Right after this, you get Burke Nihill in here to
we
talk about the Titans deal to get the counterpoint on that.
What should we ask Burke? He's actually coming in what, a week?
June 20th.
Burke is very uplifting. He's a very positive guy. He's a good leader, I think, of the organization. And so when he talks about the same financing stuff that I talk about, it's definitely a different perspective.
Right.
And I appreciate his vision for the team, and I don't love the way the financing ended up, but their vision for they have a shared vision about wanting the stadium to be surrounded by a neighborhood also, and it is nice now that the arguing's done about the financing that we've got a partner that sees the area the same way. Of course, we're going to bump into each other because we're neighbors.
Yeah.
What we're developing and what they are.
If you were in the ring, who would win, you or Burke?
Depends on the contest. Probably
That's a good answer.
He's got a lot of big guys that work for him, so probably him.
If he gets to bring help, him.
Yeah,
if
for
he doesn't,
sure. I
maybe,
got Isaac and the mayor.
No, you know what? They've risen up.
Can I bring the police department?
You know what? That's a good point. Bring the police department.
But I do think the Titans are going to be fun to watch this year. We've always had a lot of change. We got a new coach. We've got a new offensive line coach, and I think it's going to be fun.
It's got to be fun.
Ask him about how the secondary is going to be this year.
Yes. Okay. What is the best way for our listeners to learn more about the East Bank, or just the other, or maybe I should even be asking actually the things other than the East Bank, as well, like what development Metro is doing outside the East Bank?
Well, because we've got our tech mayor, he made sure that all you have to do is go to www.nashville.gov/East Bank, and you can get everything we got on the East Bank. The Metro Council's got a website also with East Bank things. It is the Titans are moving toward having their community engagement commitments being reported on publicly. I don't know whether they've got that live or not, but we've been working with them to make sure that there's accountability and we can see everything that they're doing for their community engagement. And then for the other projects, it's a little hit or miss. Global Mall out in Antioch, the planning department has a pretty robust presence about what their community engagement has told them there. And then some of these smaller ones, I don't think there's much of an online presence for them. Yeah. But I know the local council members, Jennifer Gamble in North Nashville and Sherry Weiner out in Bellevue, are being really proactive with their
newsletters and
constituents about the engagement process.
Oh, very cool. I'm sure they would be happy to put you on a mailing list.
I'm sure they would.
Well, thank you so much. We know that you're busy. As he sits here today, he's watching his phone for a directive. So we know that you're busy, and we appreciate you taking time to join us.
Thanks. It's been great.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
We will catch everybody next time.